there'll be moments where I just crush this talk on a big stage, or I lead a client immersion that's just epic, and I'm living my dharma, I'm fulfilling my purpose. And then when everything fades away and it's just me sitting there, I'm going, I'm that little boy that just wants someone to say, you did so good.
Yeah.
You did so good. And I think that whether it's the high of a Lamborghini or just someone saying, you did really good today, we are children.
Yeah.
We are little children that are searching for something constantly.
We're back, baby, with a brand new season of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Join us each week as we have unfiltered conversations about how to transform your life. Our mission is to usher in a new era of spirituality where you don't have to be all love and light to live a life of alignment. Here, we honor all of it, the profound and the profane, the magic and the messy, and all things that make you human. So let's discuss the truth behind transformation and be unapologetic in our evolution. From manifestation to money, embodiment to energy, and all taboo topics, nothing is going to be off limits. Are you ready to live a life that feels just as good as it looks? Let's get fucking spiritual. Welcome back to another episode of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so excited for this episode today, and that is because we have someone on the show who is honestly unlike anyone else that we've ever had on, and I'm really excited for this conversation and how it's going to unfold. He is an internationally touring spoken word poet and public speaker, and he is known for helping people create fulfilling relationships, thriving aligned businesses, and also expand in their creativity. He has spoken on stages all over the world, including Rise and MindValley, and he also has, I think, the most viral ever poetry on, or I guess spoken word poem online, amassing over 250 million views, which is wild. And as a coach and consultant, he has manifested clients worth $1 million and works with public figures all over the world. So I am really excited to have him on the show today. And beyond, all of the successes and the things that I just listed, for me, what I really love about him is the authenticity that you can feel in his work and the way that he just has a deep heart in all that he does. And it's really palpable when he speaks. So with that, I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode, and hopefully it will spark your own creativity. So Adam Roa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was really nice. And you're not you're like looking into the camera as you're saying it. So I feel as if I'm observing this private moment where you're talking about me behind my back. It's really interesting.
Does it feel good to receive?
It feels really good. Yeah, because I didn't have the same resistance to receiving because you weren't looking at me.
Okay.
Right? It was like, wow, she thinks that?
Well, this is what people say behind your back. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It feels good.
Yeah, good way to start a podcast. I'm so excited for you to be on this show today and to dive into all the different things that you do, because you do so much. And as I was researching for the show, and I know we have some mutual friends, it's just like, I've just heard really great things about you, and your work and your art is so beautiful. And I know you've gone on quite a journey, and something that I like to do when I start these shows is I want to know the Adam from before you were the Adam sitting here. Like, what has your journey look like? And I know this is a really big question, and I'm sure there's I know there's moments that have been like these really big pivotal moments for you that we're going to get into. But who were you as a child and growing up? Were you always this creative, entrepreneurial spirit, or was that something that you actually ended up developing later in your life?
I would say it was an initial nature aspect of me when I was really young. I loved to act in school plays and things like that. But when I entered into the junior high school era, I lost it.
Yeah.
I just didn't see myself as being creative. At the time, so I'm 39, and at the time, the most popular shows on television when I was in high school, basically like That 70s Show. And so the movie stars were Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, and then Ashton Kutcher on That 70s Show. And so I just looked and went, well, there's no one no one like me is famous. No one that looks like me is an actor, and that's what was my first love. And so I was combine that with being really late to puberty.
Mhm.
Just everyone else was going and I was not going
Oh.
to the puberty dance. And I went, wow, I need to figure out another way to earn love, essentially, to be loved, to be cool. And so I gave up any kind of creative endeavor and I thought, okay, I've always been smart. So I'm just going to be academically a badass and that's what I'll focus on. And then when I got to college, I won high school. That's one kind of thing. And when I say won, I mean scholarship academically to college, varsity, multiple sports, homecoming king, like all of those things. Went from
All the
really insecure.
boxes.
I checked all the boxes. And I woke up after winning homecoming king specifically, and nothing had changed. And you hear this nowadays as if it's just such common sense. What your achievements aren't going to be the thing that changes it for you. And I'm very blessed to have had that experience at 18 where I feel as though I hit every high school kid's mountaintop. And all the movies told me that every girl in school was going to want me and all of their hot moms were going to want me too. And it's like, that's the way it works. This is varsity blues. This is how it happens. And not only did I wake up and feel all of my angst and anger and self-judgment and all of that stuff still, but now I didn't have a mountaintop. I didn't know what was going to change it. And so that led me at 18 years old to start asking deeper questions about what will make me happy. They keep telling me to do all these things, go to college, get a career, do these things. And I could keep doing that, but they told me to go get straight A's, go be varsity, go these things, and I would be happy. So something's not adding up. And that led me back to acting in college. I started taking acting classes again. And that was where I reconnected to my creative artistic side more.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. And it sounds like you found this all very young. Like to have that realization at 18 is huge because I feel like I had that realization very early on as well. And so many people end up having that in their 40s or in their 50s. Like all the things that I thought were going to get me love or happiness or fulfillment didn't end up being the thing.
What was yours?
So for me, my dad died when I was 16 years old. And I know before we started the show, I mentioned I was a creative that I feel like went to sleep, and I was born singing and on stages and theater and played guitar and piano. And I always wanted to be a famous singer growing up. And also I had a parent, my father, who put a lot of pressure on me of like, you have to be a star. And now I know through many, many years of therapy that does not do well for children, of like the pressure of having to be that. And then he died suddenly when I was 16. And so there was just a lot within me that ended up, I gave up singing. I went the traditional route of college. I stopped doing all the things and eventually found self-development through a 8-year downward spiral with drug and alcohol abuse because of his death. And so early 20s was like, I'm going to make something in my life. I'm going to change my life and get into this work. And eventually that led into spiritual work. And it's been many, many years of studying, which, you know, now I feel like my creative juices kind of came out in podcasting and still being on camera, but it never was the thing that I originally loved, which was singing. But to round that out, and to your point about finding that it wasn't the key of checking the boxes, I did all of that. And I did that within my business. So it was like, first it's 10K months, then 20K months, then 50. Like, as I wanted the certain number, and then I hit those things. Then it's 1 million on the podcast and hit the, right? And the more I hit them, within 48 hours, I'm depressed. I'm like, what is that? And it was 2 years ago that I got really deep into somatic and nervous system work and started to realize, oh, yeah, okay, the thing that I think is going to give me the happiness and fulfillment only lasts for about 24 hours. And then I'm, back with myself.
And it's cool that you had that because I know some pretty famous people, and definitely a lot of people who know lots of famous people.
Yeah.
And at that level, the thing that you're talking about, where the wins have to be bigger, the events have to be bigger, the cars need to be more expensive.
The bar always moves.
The bar always moves. And so if we're not able to find fulfillment in the small victories, or what we would see as small now, it will never end. The people who One guy was saying he would go and buy a car because he was bored, and he would just go buy
Wild.
a $500,000 Lamborghini,
Hmm.
and it would be cool for a day.
Hmm.
And then the next time he did it, it didn't even last a day.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this thing. And I notice it in a different way, actually, for myself, which is funny because so much of my perspective on life is through sort of love.
Hmm.
I'm a deep lover, a very romantic human. And so I've noticed that my victories or my wins, I want to celebrate with someone.
Mm.
And so as a single man who's traveling alone so much, there'll be moments where I just crush this talk on a big stage, or I lead a client immersion that's just epic, and I'm living my dharma, I'm fulfilling my purpose. And then when everything fades away and it's just me sitting there, I'm going, I'm that little boy that just wants someone to say, you did so good.
Yeah.
You did so good. And I think that whether it's the high of a Lamborghini or just someone saying, you did really good today, we are children.
Yeah.
We are little children that are searching for something constantly. And the more that we can learn how to identify what that thing is and give it to ourselves, I think the more sovereign we really become in our journeys.
Yeah. What's that thing been for you? And how are you giving it to yourself?
I think it's you did good.
That you did. Okay. Yeah.
It's because my dad's an immigrant from the Philippines. So the immigrant mentality is, I came to this country with nothing and gave you everything. So you need to go cure cancer and become president and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so it was always, excellence was expected. It wasn't celebrated.
Ah.
And so for me, I'm still working to this day on celebrating when I do a good job, instead of just going, yeah, I'm supposed to do a good job. What's the next thing to do a good job at?
Yeah, totally. Wow. Yeah, then that makes a lot of sense too with your upbringing and your father and all of that. So with relationships, and I since you brought this up, now you talk a lot about relationships. And so I would love for us to start there and to dive into that. And you talk a lot about relationships as mirrors and just how they, and I believe the same thing is like relationships are mirrors. And if we allow them, they can be a catalyst for our growth and for our healing when we're in relationship, and also like relationship with self and the relationships, just not even just romantic relationships, but relationships just that we have with others. And I'd love to hear from you, like what has been the greatest catalyst in your growth in relationships, and like what can you give us as far as relationship as a mirror? Do you have any like specific stories for, yeah,
Just stories
the
about
story,
relationships.
anything?
I mean, I think that relationships are the greatest dojo. They really are. There's nothing that will give us an opportunity to see ourselves more deeply
Yeah.
than our relationships. And there's sort of three categories of relationship to self, relationship to other, and also relationship to the collective. And the collective being the spirit, the actual people, the society, being human. And then within that, there's all these little nuances, such as, relationship to other. You have a different relationship to your family than you do to your romantic partner. And so each of these different facets provides us an opportunity to see ourselves in completely different ways. And I think the biggest thing for me is I've had a 10-year relationship from 23 to 33 that was profound. It was no single thing on this planet has shaped me more than that relationship. We talk about my creativity. So many people look to me as just, wow, you create so much. You're an artist. You have all these things that you do. She activated that in me. That wasn't me. Sure, I moved out to pursue an acting career, but I didn't see myself as a creative at the time. I saw myself as an actor. It was still labeled in that way. And then she activated me to start writing and producing and directing. And then suddenly I couldn't say, well, I'm just an actor. No, now what am I? I'm an artist. I'm a creative.
Yeah.
And so I think that when that relationship ended, I had become who I was in the context and safety of that relationship. And so the biggest realization for me when it ended was I actually don't know who I am outside of it. And that journey that's what all my poetry is about. That's what all of my art is about, is the journey of figuring out who I am and how to love myself that previously I outsourced to someone else.
Yeah. What did that journey look like for you in terms of reclaiming that inward and not giving that out to someone else?
Depression. Yeah. Suicidal depression for over a year. I had a really crazy year so I was paid $1 million for a one-on-one coaching contract.
Which I want to get into at some point.
And so became a millionaire, and then 10-year relationship ends. Then poem goes insanely viral. 40 million views in 48 hours viral. And deep depression. And so that year of my life was sort of everything's different now and figure it out. And so I went on a journey of self-love primarily. If I had to summarize what that was about, was truly learning how to love myself. But in that time, that's also where I discovered the power of art and where I became this person that people look to as someone who wants to empower creativity in others, because it saved my life.
Yeah.
And understanding how our relationship to our own creativity is our relationship to our soul. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping and inspiring others to take what they feel and turn it into art.
Yeah. Okay, I really want to dive into that, but before we do, you just touched on a lot of things. That
you're asking these very broad questions.
Very broad. Well, I want to see where you're going to go. We'll just see where you take it.
Yeah.
But okay, so how old are you at this point?
33.
Okay, so you're in your Jesus year.
Jesus year,
Okay, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you have the $1 million client that comes through. You go through a breakup, and you have the video go viral online, all in 1 year.
Correct.
And then you hit a massive depression, it sounds like, as
Yes.
well. So there's so many different ways. I almost want to go through multiple of these. I want to start with the $1 million contract.
Got it.
So because I imagine people listening to this, there's so many people, and maybe you're listening to this and you almost have like an aversion to that. Like, what is that even? How can you even?
Yeah.
What? Right? There's going to be people that are listening to this. So my invitation for you is to listen to this with an open mind, and also allow this to inspire you and expand your possibility. Because at least for me in my own journey, seeing other people in their expanded possibility has been what has helped pave the way for me.
What's the part of you right now that has the aversion? Like what is that thing that you're picking up on that might be present?
I can just sense that. I know a lot of my listeners are brand new to this work.
Okay.
And so sometimes
Coaching or spirituality?
both.
Okay.
Both. And so even, $25,000 contracts is like crazy, right? So I'm just picking up on, if anybody's listening to this, I have a very broad audience, right? A lot of people are still in the 9-to-5 jobs. A lot of people are, in all different aspects of their journey with money and with investing in themselves. And I talk about investing in yourself a lot on the show. But I also just am like presencing that if anybody is listening to this and are like, oh, maybe that's like rubbing up against an edge within myself.
Well, that's how it happened, actually.
Okay.
So I had someone on my podcast who was infamous in our community for having been paid $1 million for coaching. And I had her on my podcast, and she was sitting across from me, and I said, I don't know how you say that to someone. The idea of sitting across from someone who wants to work with me and me saying, yeah, it's $1 million, I contract so hard. Yeah. I just can't imagine ever doing that. And she left that podcast interview, and it really bothered me. I had that same feeling that we're kind of talking about. This part of me that just went, why can't I charge $1 million? That discomfort of knowing that I could very clearly see a limitation to what I thought I was worth.
Yeah.
And that I'm just pair it with what we've been talking about, high achiever, all of these things. But I'm someone who also has a chip on his shoulder. I don't like being told I can't. I can't
Same.
do something.
Yeah.
What do you mean I can't do something? I might choose not to, but telling me I can't. And so when I realized that somewhere in me, I felt I could not charge $1 million for coaching, or I was not worth $1 million, which is more accurate, really bothered me. And that set off a deep initiation. And that's where it can go pretty crazy into the realms of spirituality and medicine ceremonies and just
Let's do it.
A lot of things.
Tell the journey. I want to know.
Well, okay, let's see.
Well, okay. So let me pause for a moment. So she's on your podcast and she says to you, I charge $1 million. And you're like, how the fuck are you charging $1 million? Because I can't imagine doing that. Like, so something comes up within you.
Yeah. So she was sitting across from me, and she was known. She used it as a brand, like $1 million mentor. Like it became a thing and everyone knew it.
Yeah.
And so when she was sitting across from me, I said, I was aware of you as this person who was paid $1 million for coaching. That's kind of like what precedes you into the space. And when I just imagine, and everyone listening to this, imagine if you're a coach or you have some kind of service like that, and someone says, I would love to work with you. What does that look like? Could you say, yeah, it's $1 million?
Yeah, that's like, cool. Sounds wild for me. I'm like 100K feels like my.
Right. And so when she left, that bothered me.
Yeah.
And so I said, why is that the case? Why do I not feel worth it? And when you decide that you want to shift something in your life, and that is essentially manifestation, because it's either I want to shift something, I want to attract something, whatever it is, one of two things is going to happen. You are either going to be given it because you're a match to it and it'll show up very, very quickly, or you're going to be given the path. And one of those two things happens. And the path is a combination of adding the things that you need and subtracting the things that you don't. And so that was essentially the journey that I needed to go on. And there was a lot of initiations around money. There was a lot of initiations around surrender. There was a lot of initiations into energetic understandings of how do we expand our capacity actually to hold energy and move energy. And within 12 months, I was paid $1 million.
Wow. So within that 12 months, you go into the journey of adding and subtracting the things that aren't working and the things that you need to become. So what did that look like practically? What were those specific things for you? Were there certain fears? Was there ways of being, operating?
Yeah. So on one level, I was in debt at the time.
Okay.
And because I had gotten into 2 car accidents 13 months apart, both of which required surgery, both of which were not my fault. So when you talk about the Saturn return leading up to this Jesus year, my Saturn return was super intense.
Yeah.
And for people not listening, go look up Saturn return.
I'm completing mine right now, and it has kicked my ass. So
that's generally a sign of the more stubborn you are.
Okay, great.
Because the harder we hold on to the past identity and things that are not aligned with our next chapter, the more intense that Saturn return needs to be often. And mine was super intense. And so anyway, anyone who's been in a car accident, when they're not your fault and then you need surgeries or whatever, it's technically a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit that has to happen where in order to get paid for all of that stuff. Now, I had to get surgeries, which I put on credit cards while these cases were happening. And so I was making enough money to cover a really great lifestyle, but not enough money to pay off these tens of thousands of dollars in medical debt. And so at the time, one of my initiations was around what does debt even mean? Energetically, what is debt? What is when you're not able to make enough money to get yourself out of debt? What is the energetics of that? Because I believe that our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies are all layers of the same cake. So
Mhm.
you can't have something happening physically that's not showing up in your energetic body. And you can't have something that's happening emotionally that's not taking place physically as
Mhm.
well. And so they're these layers. And so it was just an expansion of understanding that I needed to go through around a lot of that stuff. And so debt was an example of that. My own pricing and figuring out, how do I price things?
Mhm.
Because like right now, I haven't charged 1,000,000 cents. And why is that? Well, how do I choose to price things, and understanding what
Mhm.
price even means on an energetic level, and then um, surrender. So when I finally got out of that debt, I had this money, and that was maybe 20 grand in my account finally after years of being in
Mm.
debt. And it felt so good. And suddenly I received this very clear message in a ayahuasca ceremony to make my first spoken word poetry album. And I talked to a producer friend of mine, and it's basically all of my money
Mm.
to make this album. And I go, I can't, what? It doesn't even make sense. All of my friends told me it doesn't make sense for you to do that. How are you going to get the money back? There's no
Mhm.
ROI on that. And yet it was so clear intuitively that I needed to do this thing. It was
Mhm.
clear. And that was a little example of, are you willing to spend every last dollar that you have in on the path of what you're being told to do by spirit?
Mm.
Are you? And so many people listening to this are going, yes, yes, yes. But are
Are
you?
you?
When that moment actually happens,
Yeah.
are you? Clear out your bank account in order to make something that realistically makes no sense? And all of these different types of tests.
Mhm.
And then eventually I'm in an ayahuasca ceremony, and I'm just in this angst of, what more do you want from me? I've given you everything.
Yeah.
What more do you want? And the medicine eventually just takes me on this crazy journey in the most intense ceremony I've ever been in my entire life. And on the end of that ceremony, the medicine said, you've now been willing to go where 99.9% of the population is never going to go. And that
Mm.
makes you priceless. It's $1,000,000 to work with you. And I was just shown this initiatory thing that I'm talking about, and all these different tests.
Mhm.
I didn't know I was being tested at the time. It wasn't
Mhm.
me going, oh, this is a test.
Yeah.
No, but at the end of it, in this ceremony, I was shown all of these moments and these decisions I made and all these things. And the medicine said, this makes you priceless.
Mm.
And it's $1,000,000 to work with you. Claim it. And so I'm in this teepee. It's pitch black. It's like the end of the ceremony. And I go, it is now $1,000,000 to work with me. It's completely silent. And the shaman goes, and may all the resources be used for the greatest good of all.
He's like,
Yeah.
okay.
And yeah, is a woman, and she says this, and I'm just sitting there, and another minute passes, and the medicine says, you will have your first $1,000,000 client by the end of the week.
Mm.
Claim it out loud again.
Mhm.
I will have my first $1,000,000 client by the end of the week. And as soon as I claimed that, 3 people were shown to me.
Mm.
And yeah, 5 days later, I was transferred $1,000,000 in one lump sum for a 1-year one-on-one coaching contract.
Wow. Wow, talk about a master manifester right there. That's wild, and so expansive. And once you claimed it, did you feel all parts of you, your energetic body, your belief, like all of that were on board, or did you have any lingering fears that still came up? Like, what if I can't deliver this? Or like, did you have any of that conversation, or were you just
No, so I didn't. I mean, I was out of my mind.
yeah,
This was the most intense. I've probably sat around 60 ayahuasca
yeah,
ceremonies over the last like 12 years
hmm
since I first started, and I've never had a ceremony that intense.
hmm
That was, and so I was still not in right mind, but I was shown 3 people.
hmm
One of them was in that ceremony,
okay,
and we got into a conversation in between a second ceremony that we were going to go into the next night. And I supported him in his integration from that first one. And I said, I really think I could help you long term. And he said, I agree. What does that look like? And I said, well, you heard it. It's $1 million.
Mm.
And he goes, well, it's not liquid. I would have to move some stuff around or sell. And I go, well, you heard it. It needs to happen by the end of the week. And he goes, okay, I'm in. And he says yes. And I couldn't believe that maybe 4 hours after this ceremony that this person literally just said he's going to coach with me for $1 million. And so I went into the second ceremony asking for a sign, and I got my sign in that ceremony. And at that point, I went, done. And the part to this story that I want to add that often is left out when I share this is, so this guy comes over to my house after the weekend. We're having dinner. We're still in agreement. He's going to pay me $1 million, whatever. 2 days later, I'm called to support someone else of the three. And they're in a breakdown. It's really intense. And I support them. And I say, I think I could really help you long-term. And they said, I agree. What does that look like? He said, it's $1 million. And they said, yes.
Wow.
And so now I have 2 people who've agreed to coach with me for $1 million. And I'm going crazy. I couldn't believe I just made $2 million in 3 days. And I'm meditating on it the next morning. And it very clearly, my intuition, spirit, God, whatever says, it's only supposed to be one. You have to pick. And I send a message to the first guy and I say, I'm really sorry if you've started to move some stuff around. Someone else said yes to this offer and it's only supposed to be one. And I have to withdraw this offer. And so I withdrew and nixed a $1 million client because I was told it's only supposed to be one. And that's a really important part.
Yeah.
Because I believe if I hadn't done that, the other one wouldn't even have happened.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
again, this spiritual testing. When people listen to this, when you say, oh yeah, I'd give every last dollar I have. Cool. What if it was $1 million? Would you give every last dollar of $1 million? Would you give it back? And so, yeah, that's what I mean. My path isn't, oh, I've grown revenue 10% year after year.
Yeah.
It's these weird sort of dynamics at play.
Wow. And the last part of that story to me is actually the most interesting because it shows a few things about you and also about this path that you have to be so committed to integrity and what is true and listening and being willing to follow it like completely. And I honestly believe that's probably part of the reason why these crazy, wild things have happened to you, because you're willing to say no.
Yes, I lead a program called the Artistic Entrepreneur. It's an incubator program for exactly what it sounds like. People with the heart of an artist, but the mind of an entrepreneur, and figuring out how to put these two together.
Yeah.
And really what I'm doing inside of that program and with my one-on-one clients is I believe that what I'm describing to you right now and telling you about is replicable. I don't think that I'm special in some way that is inaccessible to other people. We are all divine. We are all tapped in. How it shows up in your life will look different, but there's mechanics at play here that I think are replicable for everyone. And I just call it magic. And how do we replicate magic? And one of the things that you're talking about is integrity. And integrity, when we're drinking water out of these mason jars, right? And the integrity of this mason jar means how much pressure can it hold? And if you put a crack in this, you would say the integrity is compromised. And now it can't actually hold the same amount of pressure that it could have before, right?
Yeah.
We are the same. And so when spirit is wanting to flow energy through you, it's aware of your integrity. And if your integrity is compromised, it cannot flow the same amount of energy through you. And even if it did, it would leak out. It would fry your system. You'd be the person who wins the lottery and then is bankrupt within a year.
Yeah.
And so people focus on it as if, oh, wow, they made a bunch of bad decisions with their money. They bought all these flashy things. That's the symptom. That's what it looks like in the 3D. What's going on underneath that is their energy body can't hold that amount of energy and it has to dissipate it. And so to your point that you were bringing up, the integrity piece is more than just something that makes you feel good. The integrity piece is a core pillar of what's needed to replicate this kind of magic in a covenant with spirit.
Oh, that's so good and so true. And okay, so if we're talking about the mechanics of magic, and if somebody is listening to this and it's like, I really want to change my life, I want to have these really big quantum leaps. Okay, I'm hearing that I need to be in integrity. I obviously need to be listening to spirit and to guidance. What are the other things?
It's funny that you're asking me this because what I've been working on is a framework and
Okay,
and modality almost
great.
of this.
We can
Um,
workshop it here.
and so I don't think I have all the
Hmm.
answers, right? But integrity is a key piece. Surrender is another massive piece because surrender is so misunderstood in our semantics. A lot of people think of surrender as giving up, but surrender is an act of faith. In this scenario, what we're saying is, I surrender into something. By saying I release the control, I'm saying who has control? What has control? What's steering the ship? And I think faith, which is directly tied to surrender but is different, faith is another key component. You Faith is so like science right now, the more we're seeing with science, we're seeing things prove what ancient texts have been saying for millennia.
Hmm.
We have heart rate variability. So Heart Math Institute, when you look into their work, they are proving we have an electromagnetic signal that's generated from the heart that comes out and around like a toroidal field. And that electromagnetic signal that you have and I have right now, they're interfacing because we're in
Hmm.
proximity. And so our energy being generated by our hearts is interfacing and exchanging information right now.
Hmm.
And so what's cool about that is that's what has been called an aura for years and years and years, right?
Hmm.
Everyone says, "Oh, you have an aura. Your aura is purple." Okay,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
think you're a quack,
Yeah.
but really, is it possible that all that's happening there is you have someone who's sensitive or has a natural talent for it or has developed their skill at perceiving the electromagnetic signal of people's hearts.
Hmm.
And while they might not see it necessarily as purple, they're feeling it. And that feel of frequency is purple. The same way that purple is actually a frequency.
Hmm.
It's a difference in frequency between green and purple and whatever in light. And so science, the more we go deep into it, we're seeing it prove these ancient texts. It's not disproving it.
Yeah.
It's bringing it closer together.
Hmm.
And I feel that with faith, um, what's interesting about that to me is that I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we prove scientifically God exists
Mm.
because faith is the component that's necessary for the magic of God to work.
Oh, yeah. I've never heard it said like that.
And so if we actually knew without a doubt God exists, it no longer requires faith. And so the
Mm.
faith is a part of that magic. It's that thing that's ineffable, the same way that in romantic relationships, trust, saying, I trust you with my heart. There is no proof that it's safe with you.
Mm.
There's no evidence that's eternal that says you will never hurt it, break it, leave me,
Mhm.
etc. But when I give you that trust, it unlocks something really magical. When I give you my faith that you will love me back and that you will hold my heart as sacred, it unlocks something magical. And I think that that's the same with God. And so I don't think we will ever prove it scientifically because we would be removing the very thing that makes it work.
Wow. Mic drop on everything you just said. Yeah, wow. The faith component is so huge. And at least on my journey, like I've had so many times where I'm so full of faith, and then I've had so many times where I am losing faith. Have you had that on your journey? Like any time that you've gone through the depression or any challenges where you're like, I do not feel this. And how did you like, if anybody's listening to this, like how do I even have faith in the midst of the darkness that I'm in or the despair that I'm in.
Yeah, I 100%,
Yeah.
100%. I think that, yeah, my heart's just feeling into the journey of depression and these periods of really questioning if there is a God, if there is a point,
Yeah.
why, more than any of that, even going, do I want to keep doing it?
Mm.
That was really the question for me. It's like, I believe in God. I believe in my past lives that I've seen. All of this stuff, and I'm just tired.
I feel
I
that.
called it soul fatigue.
Yeah.
Just, it's not even a day-to-day thing. It's just on a soul level. I feel tired of doing this light worker thing over and over and over again. So it's just,
Yeah.
okay, I'm done. I'm
But for
done with this game.
lifetimes.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah. I
exactly.
feel that.
And so that was the darkest points for me. And, you know, how does someone find faith? How does someone return to that? To me, is you hear about it so much with these dark nights of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because when you strip everything away, absolutely everything, where you feel like you've lost everything, you have no hope, you're in complete darkness, in those moments, you still have a connection to God. You still have a connection to spirit. And it's sometimes easier to see when all the rest of the noise is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to get that intense. I believe that what's necessary, though, is to replicate the void that happens when people go through that dark night of the soul. And we can replicate that with stillness,
Mm-hmm.
with silence, with getting ourselves out of our routines and our coping mechanisms and our bad behavior, getting ourselves out of the influence of people who are vibrating at a frequency that is not supportive.
Yeah.
And in that practice of silence, stillness, darkness, so to speak, metaphorically, you hear God, you
Yeah.
hear it.
Yeah. That's been certainly true for me. And in my moments of challenge or despair where I have lost faith, it's been coming back into the stillness, like coming back into the connection, and then it's been creativity. Like
Mm.
what comes through and then I end up creating from that place. So I'd be curious to hear, it sounds, I mean, for you, creativity is, I feel like, been your backbone and your lifeline and your life force. And how have, like, I mean, you're such a well-known creative at this point, and your poetry and your heart and like what's flowed through you. How did you end up like owning that? And I'm imagining that you probably return back to that in times of challenge.
Yeah, I used to, if you listen to my first spoken word poetry album called Permission, it's on Spotify if people want any of the albums, but that album is very almost observational. I write a poem called No More War, Water is Life, Make America Think Again. It's just me observationally speaking to what's going on the planet. I was in my 10-year relationship at that time, and so that's how I kind of operated within art. I had messages that I wanted to get across to people.
Mhm.
And then when I was going through this dark night of the soul, 33 years old depression, suddenly my art became incredibly personal
Mhm.
because it was the only place I could put it, my pain. My art was the only place I could put my pain and feel as if I was transmuting it into beauty. And I think that the role of the artist is to show people the layer of beauty that's actually available to all of us at all times if we tap into it.
Mm.
And so the poet can help you appreciate the feel of a coffee mug in your hands. The photographer can help you appreciate the way the light is entering the room. And the musician can help you appreciate the jackhammer in the street. And there's we are all experiencing those things, but only some of us are seeing it as beauty, as art. And to me, our creative energy is the purest expression of our soul. It's what makes us each unique. So there has never been a frequency of creative energy on this planet like yours. And it never will be again. And so what could be more healing, truly healing to us, than allowing the frequency of our soul permission to move through us and be expressed into the world? It's the deepest act of self-love. We understand the power of frequency to heal. You're hearing about sound healings and all of these other technologies, Rife machines and all of this stuff. Well, guess what? Your creative energy has a frequency to it, and it's uniquely coded to you. And so the more you tap into it, the more you cultivate it, the more you give it permission to flow through you out into the world, the more you will see yourself heal.
Yeah. What about for people who don't see themselves as an artist or that have a wound from childhood?
Yeah.
Also speaking to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that your definition of art is too limited. Yeah. What is art? That's the question I generally ask people. And they say, well, I don't know, painting, drawing. You're saying, oh, okay. You think art has to fit into one of these things, but what is art at the core? To me, art is the expression of creative energy into tangible form. That is art. And so if you take your creative energy intentionally and express it in some way, you've just created art. And that can look like how you organize your closet. It can look like how you plate your breakfast in the morning. There are so many ways that you can bring art into the world. What is the difference between, hey, I made you some pancakes, and hey, I made you some Mickey Mouse pancakes that have blueberry eyes and a banana mouth? That the difference is creativity. And so you just turn those pancakes into art. And that's a starting point for people to understand and broaden their perspective on what it would mean to make art. And if you suddenly see the things that you do, like how you organize your closet, as creative and therefore artistic, you now start to identify as an artist. And the more you start to identify as an artist, the more the world opens up for how you can express your artistry.
I love that. And what I'm hearing too is just the creation of beauty. Like, how can I create more beauty in my day to day and the way that I move through the world and the way that I see things, and having a perspective shift. And yeah, that's really beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, great question.
And I would love to go into the moment that everything changed for you when you went viral, because I imagine one day, I think I was listening to, as I was doing research, you had 5,000 followers and you had toured around, and I think you said you even lost money on the tour that you did. Was it in Australia?
Yeah, I went to Australia with 5,000 Instagram followers to do a one-man show of my poetry.
Which is, again, such a surrender and like a claiming of what you want and going after it, regardless of what the outcome looks like. And then obviously you were prepared for eventually this moment that now has amassed 250 million views, which is just wild for that many eyes to be on you and your art overnight. How did that impact you? How did that change your life? How did that change your being? I know you went into like a depression after, so
yeah,
I'd love to hear that story.
Well, the poem's called "You Are Who You've Been Looking For." You can find it on YouTube or my Instagram. And there's so many angles to this, but really the thing that's important to know is that when the poem went viral, I had less than 5,000 followers on Instagram. And at the time I was traveling the world making a reality show. So it was a self-funded reality show of what it looks like to heal from a breakup after 10 years together. It literally was just me processing. Spoiler alert, it is me crying all over the world in exotic locations, basically. And it's called The Art of Choosing Love. It's on YouTube. And this poem, that when it took off, because it's about self-love, I received thousands of messages overnight, right? And continued to receive hundreds of messages a day for a while. And I didn't have a team for social media. I didn't have a big enough social media. And so I was personally trying to get back to as many people as possible. And so I was seeing all of these messages. 90% of them, 9 out of 10 messages were just, thank you so much. I love this. I sent it to my dad or my mom or my daughter or whatever. And that felt great. But 10% of them, 1 out of every 10, was someone asking for help. Someone saying, hey, I don't actually love myself and I don't know what to do. Can you help me? People who were telling me they've been thinking about killing themselves. People who were telling me that they were being abused by their fathers or their husbands or whatever. And they said, I don't know what to do. Please help me. And I didn't know how. I did not know how to help these people. I had sort of shunned entrepreneurship. The idea of having a F word, a funnel, was just awful to me. It just somehow felt manipulative. Like, I'm not here to sell people stuff. I'm here to put my art out into the world, and the people who want to buy stuff from me, or at the time I was doing one-on-one coaching only. That was the only offer I had. And so I didn't have an ebook I could send them. I didn't have a course they could take. I didn't have a program. I had nothing for a next step. And that's really what shifted a lot. First of all, as a side note, that shifted a lot around business for me. Business is not about convincing someone to buy your product. You put together the right messaging, the right marketing, the right funnel, so that the people who need your product can find it and know it's for them. And so that was a big shift for me. And also, just that question of, hey, I'm thinking about killing myself and I don't love myself. What should I do? And me going, I don't have an answer for that person. Meanwhile, I'm getting 1 million views a day on a poem about self-love. I'm a fraud. I'm an imposter. And it was the final straw that dropped me into a really deep depression. And the irony of it, in hindsight, is that this poem about self-love was how I learned to love myself. Because once it went viral, that's when I figured out I didn't actually know how to love myself. I thought I did because I wrote this poem. So obviously I know something. But here I was outside of the safety net of that 10-year relationship, not knowing how to love myself, deeply in depression. And that was the next part of the journey, was how do you actually learn how to love yourself? And so that took me many years.
What does that practically look like for you?
Well, the biggest confusion people have around self-love is that they think you either have it or you don't. You either love yourself or you don't, as if I'm turning on a light or I'm turning it off.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works. Self-love is the byproduct of your relationship with yourself. And so the same way that in your own romantic relationships, the more love you put into it, the more quality time you spend together, the more words of affirmation that you give, the more nice you are to each other, that builds a stronger love. And if you neglect a relationship and you don't do those things, it will damage the love. And so that's the exact same thing with our relationship with ourselves. And so when someone says, I don't love myself, it's like, actually you do. You just want to love yourself more. How do you do that practically? Well, I think about it through the very simplified 5 love languages, which are words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, physical touch, and acts of service. And just look at it through those categories and go, am I doing that for myself? In all 5 areas. And physical touch, as an example. When's the last time, for a lot of people listening, when's the last time you took an hour and you simply connected to your body physically? You stretched, you massaged yourself, you just loved up on your body physically, and with that intention in mind, for a lot of people, it's like self-pleasure, like masturbation, or like they're working out or something. Like those are the 2 things. But think about it, if you were having a relationship with your partner, It's hey, can I just give you a massage and stretch out your body and love up on your body without it needing to be sexual
Mm.
and without it needing to have some purpose. I'm not working you out. It's just, I just want to love up on your body. That would feel really good from your romantic partner. When's the
Yeah.
last time you've done that for yourself? And how would you feel being in a relationship with someone who always tells you that you can't, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough? And yet, how often are you saying that to yourself over and over? How do you think that's affecting your relationship with yourself? And that's the high level shift in understanding that I developed. And once I had that, I just started doing way more activities that I thought were loving, whether that was baths, exercising, dancing, crying, journaling, meditating, stretching, but with intention of getting to know myself better and giving myself what my body and soul really needed.
Yeah.
And once I started doing that, I just gradually started to notice things shifting.
I love that. And that's so practical that people can take from this. And that's been a really big thing for my journey as well. I've been on a really deep self-love journey. I went through a full celibacy journey. I did like the whole thing. And one of the things for me too in my self-love journey has been learning how to feel and like allowing myself to feel what is present in the moment without making myself wrong for it, without shaming myself for it, like literally letting every single thing come up rather than numbing it out or overworking or doing all the things. Like that's been one of the biggest pieces for me too.
It's
So
a really, really big one. It's
yeah.
because what you're doing in that moment is you're basically saying it's okay. It's okay that you feel this way. It's okay.
Yeah.
And that is something we all need to hear, because I think a lot of our wounds and our trauma come from childhood of being told it's not okay.
Yeah.
We're taking it on somehow, somewhere from the media, the movies, our friends, whatever. Somewhere along the line, we basically decided that certain aspects of our humanness is not okay. And so, yeah, that's a really big one and a great piece of advice. How long did you do the celibacy journey for?
A year.
A year.
A full year. Yeah.
Got it. Was it intentionally 1 year?
Kind of. It was intentionally wasn't going to. It wasn't like I'm starting this now, and it just kind of ended up being a year, and it was
it.
as long as it's meant to be. And within the year, I did 3 full months of isolation without seeing another person, and I did only somatic work with a therapist, and that was it. So it was a really.
Where were you in the world?
I was here in Austin, but I just stayed at home, and I just didn't go. And I told everybody that I knew, like, "Hey, I'm not doing anything. I'm not talking to you. I'm nothing. Don't call me." And I'm going inward.
And what about like grocery store? Like, did you leave the house?
I did. I went to the park. So the only things I could do, we could do like a whole other, a whole other conversation on this.
Fascinating.
Yeah, the only things I could do, it was no input of any kind. So no social media, no Netflix, no phone calls. I did a few, but like no even reading books, no podcasts. It was me on the grass in the park or painting, drawing, playing guitar, or journaling outside of somatic therapy. And I did like 3 to 6 hours of somatic work a day with my therapist. It was
what's interesting that I share, and I want to applaud you for doing that. During this time that we're talking about in my life, I was exploring the idea that everything is really frequency, right? And I went, okay, I feel somewhat toxic. I feel this depression, this darkness, and I don't want to put it out into the world. So I am going to keep my phone off every single day until I felt myself shift from where I woke up to a higher vibe. And sometimes that was easy, but some days took 3 or 4 hours of practices.
Yeah.
Whether that was playing guitar, TRE, which is tremor release exercises to move somatically through the body, dancing, screaming, saunas, cold plunge, like going on runs, whatever I needed to do until I felt a shift. And once I felt the shift, I said, okay, I can turn my phone on. And so it was hours and hours and hours of each day really dedicated to that intention.
Deep respect for that and really resonate with that on my journey. And yeah, it was a little different doing like the full 3 months, but I've noticed that I have to keep those practices and keep the input out and reconnect with myself. And like, that's when I'm when I'm doing the best and when I'm the most creative and when I can be the most of service and when I'm the happiest is when I'm tending to that first. And when it slips, I can feel that it slips.
So did you set like 90 days as the container, or you just went, I'm going to do this for a certain amount of time, and then you just kept extending?
That it was the deepest act of surrender, because my therapist, he's amazing. He's like 85 years old. He's been doing this for many, many years. He's like one of those, just he's very, very wise. And he said to me, he hadn't taken on a client in 5 years. And I came through him. It was like my financial advice. It was how we got connected was very serendipitous. And he said, I will come out of retirement and I will do this with you. But you have to give me 100%, and we have an indefinite amount of time, and we will know when we hit it. And I was like, okay. So I had no idea how long I was going to be in this. I paused the podcast. I paused everything. I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to be in isolation for an indefinite amount of time. And it ended up being 3 months.
What was the thing that made you, were you addressing a particular trauma or wound, or was it just a feeling that you needed?
No, it was specific, but yeah, it was the father wound and losing my father at 16. And then I had done a lot of work, but I had just reached a point where essentially I had created the vision board that I wanted in my life, and I didn't feel any better. And I had one really big thing kind of happen in my life that ignited the wound that made me basically say, okay, absolutely not, no more. Like, I'm going to go into this and figure out what this is and heal it. And it was things that I couldn't see. And it was massive. I came out a completely different person. Like, everything shifted. My voice changed, all of it. Like, it was a wild
You
experience.
can listen to your voice
from season 1 versus season 2. It's crazy.
Wow.
My voice is like really high pitched, and I was really up here, and my energy went from here to here.
Got it.
Yeah. So
yeah, because you were finally safe in your body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was molested at the age of 5. That was a repressed memory. I didn't remember until I was 30.
Wow.
So the journey of becoming safe in your body, I don't know that enough people realize they need that. I didn't know I didn't feel safe in my body.
I didn't either.
Like, that was not, it was, I just wasn't aware of that until the memory came back. And when the memory came back, I remember crying these tears of such deep gratitude, because I felt as if it all finally made sense.
Yeah.
You don't know you're dreaming until you wake up. That's why the spiritual awakening, it's sometimes really overused. I had an awakening, but I don't know a better term to describe what it feels like than I was asleep. And I didn't know I was asleep until I woke up. And it was a similar experience where I didn't know that I felt like a stranger in my own body until I no longer felt like a stranger in my body.
Yeah.
And so kudos for doing that deep work. And
Thank you.
also for anyone listening to this, after everything that I've been through, all the ceremonies and the cosmic stuff and all of that stuff, at the end of the day, I actually think the starting point is the body.
Yeah, I agree.
Somatically, everyone's chasing the out of body experiences, but oftentimes that's because of the trauma that's causing people not to feel safe in the body. And so it feels much better to leave the body to have these out of body spiritual experiences. And then New Age spirituality has often created this unhealthy feedback loop mechanism that the more astral you are, the more spiritual you are. And it's causing, it's creating a hiding place for people to go who actually are incredibly disembodied. And because they're disembodied, they're not actually living the human experience. And so everything they're now teaching comes from a place of unconsciously being anti-human.
Yeah.
Because the human experience is not safe for them. And I know this because I was there and I didn't know I was there.
Yeah.
And so for anyone listening to this, if you want a starting point, get into somatic work, start paying attention, develop a relationship with your body where you understand what it's saying to you and you can be in communication with it.
Yeah, that's basically the entire second season of the show has been me talking about somatic work and nervous system work, and has been born out of my months in isolation. So I talk about that a lot. So thank you for bringing that, because they already know if they listen to the show. So
What was the single exercise that was most valuable for you?
Breathwork's been huge for me. Swamping has been huge for me,
What
like
is swamping?
rage release.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of the like shaking movement, the kind of like tremor, the release stuff
Pillow
that,
pounding,
yeah,
all the
pillow
things,
pounding, all of
primal
that,
screams. Yeah.
screaming. Yep. And what I always just come to is breath, sound, and movement. It's like not even for me, it's this specific exercises. I just trust my body now to go and express the way that it needs to and move the way that it needs to. And it's been, yeah.
I just
Really.
did a 2 week immersion, 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday for 2 weeks in the Netherlands of psychosomatic movement therapy as hip hop dance.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
How was
Shout out
that?
to a mentee. I'm a huge fan of their work. It was incredible
Wow.
because, yeah, everything that you're talking about, shaking, moving,
Yeah.
how the body wants to express. Now, let's add a little art to that.
Okay.
So, how can you rage release as dance? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you express the longing on your heart for romance, that could be expressed as poetry, but could your body express it through a dance? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's been I love to dance, and so when I found that, yeah, I was dancing this morning. It was
I
great.
love that. Yeah, dance has been a big one for me too. That's amazing. Well, we actually went a little over on time. Are you okay on time?
Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
Oh, look
Okay.
at one.
Oh, hey.
Oh,
That's
perfect.
divine.
That's
Perfect.
it.
Well, before we go today, I've so loved this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on. And I would love if you are willing to share a spoken word poem with us, anything that's alive for you now that feels potent to share with the audience. I would love for them
Yeah.
to hear your magic.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. This has
Yeah.
been a great conversation, and just getting to hear the depth of your own journey, and know that all of you listening to this, listen to this woman. Not many people do that level of real deep work, and
Thank
so
you.
I'm really excited to see how that continues to unfold for you and for your tribe. Yeah, I think the poem is probably the self-love poem that we've been talking about
Okay,
so
great.
much. Feels appropriate. And so yeah, let's go there. So this poem is called You Are Who You've Been Looking For. Would you like me to direct it to you or to the camera? What do you prefer?
Whatever you
Rachel?
feel called to.
Oh no, you got to give me
Don't
some
put me on the
direction.
spot.
You're directing this whole thing. Okay, I'm going to gift it to you then. and
Okay,
then I'll read
thank
it.
you.
You're welcome. Everyone take a nice deep inhale and exhale. You are who you've been looking for. So stop looking for more unless you're looking in a mirror, because it's about time for you to see clearly that you are who you've been looking for. And that empty feeling you got, that hole in your chest, you only got that feeling because you think you're not blessed with everything you need. You see, we live in a consumerist society, which means they need you to buy stuff. And the easiest way to sell it is to tell you you're not enough. Buy this car, you'll get girls. Buy this bra, you'll get guys. And we're seeing it so much that we start believing these lies. But the truth is, the makeup they're selling to make you feel prettier is the same makeup you buy to stop feeling shittier about this lie they keep telling you that you are not enough. And what about the movies we watch? All the shows on TV, the more I watch, the more I see I need you to complete me. And yes, love is the answer. Love is the key. But if you can't love yourself, how can you ever love me? And loving yourself, what does that even mean? Like massages and selfies and that sort of thing? Because the more I think about it, the more it feels weird. I've always thought self-love was something to be feared. I've been taught that arrogance is bad and vanity, it's not good. And even my bracelets are telling me to act how Jesus would. So what should I do? How should I act? I'm supposed to love myself, but how do I even do that? Well, I got a trick that I picked up from a friend who noticed that I was quick to defend her when she would say something negative about herself. She'd say, I'm so dumb. And I'd say, you're so brilliant. She'd say, I'm so weak. And I'd say, you're so resilient. And when she said, I feel ugly, and I said, you look beautiful, she asked me why I was so dutifully filling up her cup constantly and yet treating my own cup so irresponsibly. Because when I looked in the mirror, my voice was quite clear. You're ugly, you're too thin, your hairline's receding, and you got a pimple on your chin. And that was when she gave me a piece of advice that changed my life. She gave me a hug, and she said, treat yourself like someone you love. Treat yourself like someone you love. Now, I had been standing, but I needed to be sitting because I couldn't believe that I had been letting myself keep forgetting that I was who I'd been looking for. And deep in my core, I knew it was time to stop looking for more until I could look through all my fear and look into a mirror and see clearly that the man looking back at me is the only one who can make me happy, and I am already enough. And I'm not any more special or unique than you. That's why I'm here to speak to you. You are already enough. And when you start to see that, you will start to be that. Your world will get brighter, your load will get lighter, and you can see that with life. You can be a lover, not a fighter, and that life, you deserve it because you are worth it. And there's no point in letting yourself keep forgetting, because no matter what you say or do, you are perfect. And so today, I hope I leave you with a direction correction, away from the flaws you see in your reflection. They aren't flaws to me. They are simply protection against all the doubts you have of your perfection. So start today. Take a good long look in the mirror and say, I am who I've been looking for.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Wow, so potent. I fully received that.
Yep. My gift to you.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me on. It's been such a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. This has been amazing. And there's so many nuggets of wisdom here and just in this show. And I feel like I could have gone another hour. So we'll have to have you back on at some point when
my book is done.
When your book is done. Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. And where can everybody find you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of online real estate. So Instagram is my main platform, adam.roa, R-O-A, adamroa.com. I have a podcast called The Creative Path with Adam Roa, which you can find everywhere. And then I have my poetry on YouTube and on Spotify.
Okay, great. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes. Adam, thank you so much for coming on today. And as always, if you guys loved this episode, share it with a friend, with someone that you feel needs to hear it. And yeah, I'm so glad you tuned in this episode. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so glad that you're here. And if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to share this with a friend that you feel needs to hear it. And if you are really feeling the love and support for this show, this podcast thrives off of your listens and your reviews. So I would love if you could leave us an honest review. We would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, and it helps us get this podcast in the hands of more people and would mean so much to me to receive your support. So thank you.